The immigration debate is officially underway here on Capitol Hill, and there is a lot to negotiate. The big question, is there a path to a solution or any kind of solution at all?
They really do have their work cut out for them, especially given these two GOP senators. Both of them have said that they do not believe that this trial is even constitutional. They're very happy also with what they're seeing in Georgia, and they knew that this was going to be a very important state. This situation has escalated very, very quickly. There are people that have breached the inside of the U.S. Capitol. Protesters somehow were able to get through the front door. Usually what we see when it's a big inauguration, we see literally crowds all the way down the National Mall.
I can ask a follow-up to one of the doctors. If you allow children back in the schools, wouldn't that pose a threat to spreading the virus even further to some of those vulnerable?
Well, I think the answer is obvious.
Republicans in the House and the Senate have different ideas when it comes to policy and when it comes to strategy. And Democrats in the Senate don't even really want to participate at this point.
As you mentioned with the law clerks, when we saw them standing on the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court, part of what they were doing there really resembles Jewish tradition. This is an example of the cabin that the crew would reside in at night. And as you can see here, this mattress is no larger than a twin. Democrats are going to have a very robust outreach effort to compete with this one here. All three of these Republicans really have been wavering in the aftermath of these allegations. We don't expect these to be available to kids until the end of 2021 or even into 2022.
I never said any of these things since I have been elected for Congress. These were words of the past.
Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's a changed woman and no longer believes in the QAnon conspiracy. This as House Democrats are doubling down on their calls to remove the freshman Republican from her committee assignments.
There needs to be a severe action taken so that we can render her somewhat less powerful and minimize the harm that she can do.
Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz put forth the resolution to remove Greene from the education and labor panels. This after Greene suggested the Parkland shooting was a hoax and was seen harassing a victim.
Every day that she is allowed to sit on any committee, but particularly the education committee, is another cut in the harm caused by conspiracy theorists like her who continue to harass, stalk, and torture the families who simply want to be able to honor the memories of their children and the faculty that were lost that day.
The full House vote to remove Greene from her committees is a move House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy called a partisan power grab.
They're going to judge her on things that were said that she has now denounced before she was ever a member of Congress.
Fractures within the GOP are clear as other prominent Republicans are trying to distance themselves from Greene. Should Marjorie Taylor Greene be allowed to stay on her committees?
I don't get involved in the House stuff because that's them. I don't have an opinion. I don't even know how their process works in that regard. I can tell you generally that I think our party should reject conspiracy theories, particularly if it comes to Parkland. Anybody who says it didn't happen is either deranged or is a sadist.
Democrats that I've spoken with say that they are concerned about the precedent that this vote is going to set, and they've been questioning if Republicans will go after their members if they take the House majority in the future. Tammy? More money, more problems. That's the reality several borrowers are facing after they applied for the small business loan program through multiple banks and ended up with twice the amount they expected.
Nobody expected this to happen, and it did happen. I don't know how they got through, but duplicate applications got through, and somebody needs to answer for that.
Rita Zapko, a business and tax consultant, discovered the error with several of her small business clients.
We saw the wires pending, and we were thinking, this is going to get halted at some point, and then the wires settled. Surprise, a few hours later, there's the money.
This exact scenario played out with other applicants. They showed us documentation that the loans had been approved and deposited right into their bank accounts by different lenders, almost simultaneously. What at least 5 of these applicants had in common, they applied through Chase or PayPal, and they received their funding late Friday evening.
There's nothing wrong with applying to multiple lenders. And obviously, hopefully, if you get one loan, you get one loan, and then the others are turned down.
But that's not what happened. Those who were funded twice say they submitted multiple applications with the same employer identification number. This should have been flagged by the Small Business Administration before it ever entered the agency's loan portal. Making this even more complicated for Chase and PayPal borrowers, they were forced to accept the money up front or lose the loan. This made it impossible to reject the funds before it hit their accounts.
Should there have been a spot to say, yes, I approve or decline before the funds came? Possibly.
Chase Bank acknowledges they're aware of the double funding issues, telling us a handful of customers have reported that they were also funded by another institution as well. The SBA will respond to each customer directly and determine the next steps. The SBA has not responded to our request for comment. Senator Marco Rubio, the architect of the loan program, says those who receive duplicate payments will not be penalized if they're upfront about the error.
I would certainly document it, put it in writing, send the SBA a letter so you have it in writing. Contact your lender in writing as well. Tell them you want to send the money back because you've gotten 2 loans. What they can't do is obviously spend it.
This latest snag means this program could be even more susceptible to fraud.
I think most people are going to return them very quickly because they're afraid that they accidentally just committed a crime, but you're going to have a percentage of people that aren't going to give the money back.
In Washington, Samantha-Jo, Roth, Spectrum, Bay News 9. On Capitol Hill, this is a place of business from 9 to 5.
So this is where I hang my hat and I lay my head every evening.
But by night, dozens of lawmakers like Congressman Dan Donovan convert their Capitol Hill offices into studio apartments.
Welcome to my accommodations. I have to make sure every night I retape that so it doesn't keep me up at night.
This closet-sized room isn't exactly the lap of luxury.
Is this comfortable, Congressman?
It works. I'm fortunate enough to have a half bath right here, but as you can see, it's kind of an institutional bath with the tiling and the makeup.
Members of Congress make $174,000 a year, while maintaining a residence in the neighborhoods around the U.S. Capitol can easily cost approximately $2,000 a month.
There are many members who, because of their wealth before they came to Congress, are able to buy an apartment, buy a townhouse. And there's others of us who have a family, limited income, and certainly have expenses back home that don't afford us the ability to have a home down here.
But in a letter to the Ethics Committee, some House members complain that others are, quote, subject to seeing and at times interacting with members in their sleeping attire, underwear, and even partially nude. They also are calling the practice offensive and contributing to a hostile work environment. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries says it's a misuse of public resources.
Why do you have individual members of Congress sleeping in their offices on the taxpayers' dime? And I was part of an effort to try to draw some attention to it to see if we can get resolution.
One resolution some here on Capitol Hill are floating, providing lawmakers with a per diem to help with living expenses, as state legislatures do, or a cost of living salary increase. Currently, lawmakers do not receive any kind of per diem to help with living expenses, but they are able to deduct up to $3,000 in housing expenses a year.
If you look at the state legislature, if you look at anybody else in the federal government, when they have to work outside of their home districts, their home area, they get a per diem. What this letter highlights is the need for a per diem here in Washington, D.C., so that members are not subject or be compelled to have to reside in their offices.
Donovan isn't a fan of the per diem idea. He says he thinks that's a waste of taxpayer resources.
It serves what I need it to serve, and nothing more, nothing less.
In Washington, Samantha-Jo, Roth, Spectrum News.
There isn't a whole lot of coral left in the Southeast Florida region.
3 miles off the Florida Keys, 4 scientists in a small boat are racing to stop a mysterious killer.
I think people would be very shocked to know that within 2 weeks, a small colony can be dead.
Karen Neely, a coral ecologist at Nova Southeastern University, is leading this group, attempting to slow the infection and fight to preserve what remains.
Scientists and marine biologists spend a lot of time documenting particularly declines of ecosystems, and we're actually one of the few that are lucky enough to be able to get out here and try to do something about it.
A different kind of way to start your morning.
We joined the team on one of their medical missions to treat the coral. Researcher Kevin McCauley and the group mix up antibiotics into paste, filling dozens of syringes with the concoction.
The amoxicillin, though, is obviously the really important part. That's what's doing the hard work actually stopping this disease.
Up in this area might be a good area for you to head to first.
And then it's go time.
Thank you.
This is a hands-on kind of job. Scientists apply the formula directly onto the tissue of the sick coral. Then the paste slowly releases the drug.
Just like that, right onto the face of the coral, right onto that disease margin. It's a pretty obvious disease margin. There's a big white line right up against healthy tissue on the coral, so it's an obvious one to see.
I think most of us don't have fingerprints at this point because we're applying it to the corals, but whatever it takes.
The researchers document their findings, marking when they provide treatment with nails and large yellow tags.
We go back to the coral, we look around, look where the nails are and see if there's any active disease to see if that treatment was effective or ineffective.
This is one of the most coral-dense areas these researchers treat. They've tagged up to 800 corals here, and without their intervention, they aren't sure if there would be any left.
We were out here a couple weeks ago looking for some other corals for another type of project. And as we looked around, we realized that everything here was either dead or had been treated by us.
Neely's group has been implementing this method for a little over a year, and they've seen an 85% success rate. In a disease outbreak that typically kills 66 to 100% of the corals infected, the team has lost less than 1% of the corals they've treated. But it's challenging and labor-intensive to keep going underwater for a cure.
It is exhausting. It's hard on the body. It's hard on the soul for sure. Watching your backyard disappear is really hard.
We don't know necessarily when's the next time that we'll be able to come back to the site. Weather dependent and other factors play into it, so we try the best we can to go as quickly and effectively as possible.
These 4 researchers are the only ones providing these types of unique treatments in the Keys.
It's also really hard to have to bypass certain corals because we need to focus on the ones that are the most important for the ecosystem, and just kind of swimming by an animal that is in distress and going to die and having to say, sorry, good luck.
At the end of the day, this dedicated crew compare notes and reflect on the greater mission. Researchers in other parts of the Caribbean have now started using their same method to save corals infected by this very disease.
It's a good feel-good to know that without us, this reef would look very different than it does, not just now, but 5 years from now and probably 500 years from now.
Reporting from Lukey Reef, Samantha-Jo Roth, Spectrum, Bay News 9.